Into the Illini Inquirer podcast. It is Jeremy Werner and Derek Piper back from Peach Jam, seeing some of the best talent in the country with all of those coaches, some of the best coaches in the country out on the road. Let's talk a little Illini hoops today, Derek. We're going to talk about your Peach Jam takeaways, but this is something we've been talking about for a while that we wanted to do. And with you busy out of the state and with me with football, Big Ten Media Days, took us a while to get here, but we're going to try and do projected stat leaders for all these different stats for Illinois basketball, which is difficult. It is very difficult with this team with so many new guys, so many unknowns, and maybe a more balanced team. But how is Georgia? Derek, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it was a great trip. Long drive, I will say that. I think I've listened to every Drake song ever recorded. So you got to find ways to pass the time. I do shout out Ryan Russillo. The life advice segment in particular is one that I certainly enjoy. I know you're a Russillo fan as well. So you got to find creative ways when you're in the car by yourself for 12 hours at a time to stay entertained and stay awake enough to make that trip. But it was great. Peach Jam never fails. It's the prime event of the summer. When you look at the talents on the floor, the coaches that are there, NBA scouts have been out there the last few years. So there was a little bit of a dead period there midweek, and it was really just media and NBA scouts sitting courtside. So it was kind of cool to sit next to some of those guys and just kind of see how they operate and what they have to say about certain dudes. So fully enjoyed my time, enjoyed myself. I didn't do the Nashville stop. I had to get home for the kids and didn't indulge in the hot chicken. So that's maybe not the best thing to eat on the road either. So yeah, it was great. I even passed by a Buc-ee's too, which I felt semi-guilty about. I'm like, I need to stop here, snap a picture, tag Wagner and Werner, but I didn't do that either. But Peach Jam was awesome.
Wagner's going to be entirely disappointed in you. I'm disappointed that you didn't make like a 20-minute stop to get the Nashville hot chicken, because that has become legend for Derek is getting that hot chicken on the way. But yeah, I mean, it's good to get back on this, because behind the scenes, just to let people know, like Derek and I the last couple of years have been like, do we even go here? Because since COVID, they've kind of cut how many credentials they've given to the media, which limits your access. And then the other part of this is, how much does high school basketball recruiting matter, especially for a program like Illinois right now? But Derek, I know 2025 class won't be very big for Illinois, most likely, but they could have a couple guys leave early. But Ben Humrickhouse is the only guy that currently is slated to be out of eligibility. So it's not a huge class, but it does feel like with the COVID year gone, prep recruiting is becoming more important, even if, and you could talk about this, Illinois has a little bit different of a strategy when it comes to high school basketball recruiting now.
They do. Yeah. It is still cool to see it emphasized and to have those events matter. And of course, when you're going to have the next crop of up and coming talent, especially in the top 50, and as we're going to discuss, the 5-star range, like those guys are impact players in a lot of senses coming to college, and a chance to dabble in that when you're coming off Elite Eight, when you have Orlando Antigua and his connections. He's been recruiting a handful of those at Kentucky and then translated that over to Illinois. Of course, it paid off with Will Riley. We'll talk about one coming up here that it didn't pay off, but that's kind of the nature of that realm. So I think it's great for Illinois to take some big swings, to know that you only lose one guy in terms of eligibility being out. And Humrickhouse, of course, you can have early exits to the NBA with Kasparis and Will Riley. Kylan wouldn't be a crazy one if he has a great year. So we'll see how that plays out. And then, of course, you always have the portal and some natural attrition that takes place. But with Illinois, you, of course, can dabble back in the portal for additions. You can go overseas again, which I think each and every year is going to be a market that they're going to try to tap into and see what they can find. So I think 2026 in general, that's probably a bigger class, because you have a lot of guys on this current roster. We talked about a 2-year window. After that 2-year window is done, going to cycle out a lot of those players. So I think that there's a wider net in that class, and there's some exciting players that they are chasing in 26, and obviously 27 is really rich in state as well. So, but 25, yeah, it's kind of been home run swing, or let's wait and see what we can do in the spring for the most part. Now, there have been a couple of exceptions to that. There's a guy in Canada that played with Will Riley that we're going to talk about that isn't a 5-star, but one that they like quite a bit. So the number of players that they're chasing isn't as big as maybe it's been in prior years, 5 years ago, but it is still an emphasis for them to get involved and to try to see if they can complement the roster that could come back with maybe a star talent as a freshman, because they've got some star freshmen on this roster as well.
All right, before we get to some of those targets, Illinois not in the top 5 for 5-star 2025 guard Jasper Johnson, who just took an official visit to Illinois. We knew they were kind of swinging up in this recruitment, trying to get into it late, similar to Will Riley. What'd you make of them not appearing in that top 5, Derek?
It sounded there's been a lot of national buzz for Alabama. I know that back even when he visited Illinois in June, that North Carolina was pretty strong. It seemed like since the John Calipari exit that Kentucky hasn't been as much of maybe a sure thing, or just their traction was a little bit more uncertain than it had been before. Admittedly, this is my read on it as somebody that's covered this for the last few months. I think that if Calipari stayed there and O was continuing to recruit him in Kentucky, I wouldn't have been surprised if Jasper went into Peach Jam, committed to Kentucky. The fact that, he's got the hometown, he's from that area, 15 minutes pretty much outside of Lexington. His dad is a football coach, AD there, and then they had been recruiting him. So once that happened, it opened things up, and for credit to O for getting him on campus. I know it doesn't even turn out to you guys being in the top 5, so that's something that's probably disappointing, but I think you could say if he's not coming here, it's better to know now. It allows you to focus a little bit more heavily on a Cayden Boozer, who we're going to talk about, or some other potential pivots. But I think for Illinois, it's one of those where you shot your shot. It didn't play out. He's got a very good relationship with O, but you are coming in late and that whole kind of thing. So I'm sure they're disappointed. They worked it all the way up to the list cut. I think that there was around the Illinois camp, they were a little more optimistic, while some of the national buzz was starting to be pretty clear. Like, hey, it's Bama, it's probably North Carolina, maybe number 2, and then Kentucky. But sometimes when you have good relationships, you don't know until the very end. It's hard to tell people that you're close with, that you have built good relationships, that you're out. So sometimes that's the case in recruiting, that you might be out before you know you're out.
Yeah. All right. So Illinois seems like they're pivoting at that lead guard position. We know they've gone after AJ DeBasanta. We know that they've gone after some other 5-star prospects, including Jasper Johnson. They're still big game hunting in the class of 2025. And everyone talks about Cayden Boozer, who's the number 2 ranked prospect behind AJ in the class of 2025. Of course, the son of Carlos Boozer. But he has a twin brother, Cayden, who is the number 19 prospect in the class of 2025. And the Blue Bloods want the Boozer brothers. But I find it interesting, Derek, that Illinois is going hard after Cayden, kind of individually here. I feel like that's an interesting sell. And for people that don't know, Carlos played with a pretty good Illinois point guard in Darren Williams. So this is really interesting. And I know you think Cayden kind of has a similar kind of game to Darren. So what do you make of this? Seemed like the guy they really focused a lot of attention on at Peach Jam.
They did, for sure. They had a Zoom with them during the event, out when it was a dead period. One of the nights, some of the schedule was broken up where teams had off days. And on Wednesday of last week, Orlando Antigua and the staff had a Zoom with Cayden. And I know that people have asked, Cam wasn't on that call. I know he was in the same hotel room. There have been some like, why is Illinois not trying to get the package deal, the twin brothers together? I think it's different. Like, you're trying to be different. You're trying to be different in the recruitment. You're late. I know that Orlando's not late because he was recruiting them in Kentucky, hosted them for an official visit back. I think it was during the season last fall where he brought those guys in. But you've got Duke that wants both of them. You got Miami that's worked it a long time. Those guys grew up in Miami. They got the hometown sell there, and Florida's trying to get it. I mean, they got offers from pretty much everywhere, as you would imagine. Guys that have done just a ridiculous amount of winning. They just won their 3rd Peach Jam, 15U, 16U, 17U. They've won 3 high school state championships, and they also won 2 FIBA gold medals. So on that note, I get how it could be hard to pull those 2 away. All the winning they've done, it might be an easy thing for them to say, why don't we go win a national championship now in college? But for Illinois, I mean, Cayden's kind of been in Cam's shadow because Cam is the number 2 player in the class. There's been arguments for him to be number 1. He's exceptional as a guy that's got a lot more size. Obviously, he's like a power forward type, more of Carlos Boozer's size, can step out and shoot it, can score around the basket. Cayden more of that true floor general. Not the best scorer. He's had moments where he can get to the rim, where he can shoot it some, but just a phenomenal playmaker, passer, makes winning plays. And for Illinois, it's trying to give him the attention, trying to say, you're the priority A. We want you as this guy to take that spotlight, to be getting all this attention. Maybe down the road, if it worked out, you could get in your brother's ear and say, hey, Cam, why don't you follow me to Illinois? That type of thing. But it is a unique push. I respect the play. You have the relationship with Orlando. And I think I will find it a success if they get him on campus, even if you don't get him ultimately. I know that people will say, well, that's not a win by any means. But if you can jump in late, sell him on him being the priority, and then get him on campus and take your shot, I think that would be a win in my opinion, because there have been some talk around the recruitment for both those guys that, hey, there might not be any more visits. This thing might be wrapped up fairly soon. If Illinois can knife in there and get Cayden to think a little bit, I would be very intrigued where that goes.
In the words of his father, give me that. Come on, Joe. Yeah, I mean that'd be huge just to get him, because then it gives yourself a chance, right? Like, I still believe in the follow the visits kind of philosophy here, which is why it's disappointing you don't get in Jasper's top 5. But getting him on campus gave you a shot at Will Riley, and you crushed it, and then things change. So yeah, if you could get Cayden, I think that shows that he would have real interest in, the fact that he talked to you and mentioned Darren Williams. It was like, wow, this kid knows a little bit about the history, and it makes sense given his dad. But Illinois does have a good sell here, Derek, in league guard play.
They definitely do. Yeah, you got Kasparis, who's widely projected as a one and done. You got Kylan, who can play with a ball handler. Kylan also somebody that, if he has a high-end type of season this year, could be back on NBA radars. He's been there before. So they need another ball handler for sure. And, yeah, you got to link up that Darren Williams connection. You got to get in Darren's ear if there is going to be a visit, or maybe have Darren start to talk to Carlos and be like, come on, you got to at least check out Illinois. And that was the thing, when Orlando spoke to us last, I think at the Kendall Gill outing, he was kind of saying that, hey, my pitch to Will was just give us a chance. Just come look at us, come look at our campus, see what we have to offer, and then make your decision. If we're something that you are highly interested, then great. If not, hey, you at least went after the most options and saw what you could see there. So that was probably the sell to Cayden. Like, come see what we have to offer. Come be around our guys. Come see what we can do for you. So if they can do that, and then maybe have Darren pop over to Champaign, because Darren and Carlos on that Utah Jazz team, that was
got to the Western Conference Finals. Yeah, they got to the Western Conference Finals one year.
Just kept running into Kobe, right?
Well, yeah, and for a while there, like, Darren was in the discussion of best point guards in the NBA. Like, at one point, he was above Chris Paul.
Yeah.
And obviously, Chris had a hell of a career, but yeah, I mean, that could resonate with a kid like that who actually knows who that is and has probably watched a lot of the film of the 2000s Utah Jazz. We talk about, Derek, like, Brad Underwood wasn't on the trail because of shoulder surgery. I can imagine a time when that would have been a big storyline for Illinois. But the fact that you have Orlando Antigua, and we'll talk about some of the other kids, but Jeff Alexander has done a really good job in recruiting here recently. It doesn't feel like it's big of a deal, because Orlando, we're seeing the importance of having somebody like him on the staff. Yes, NIL matters. Yes, NBA stuff matters, but Orlando helps with that, the NBA stuff particularly, but his connections are paying off, and being able to get a Jasper Johnson on campus, getting into the mix with Cayden Boozer, and of course, landing Will Riley and Tomislav Ivisic, who we'll bring up here a little bit later. Like, those are already paying off for Illinois, both in the recruiting battles they're getting into and guys they've landed.
Absolutely. I know some skeptics out there might say, hey, it's only going to boil down to how much money you have. NIL is going to be the ultimate recruiter for anybody you go after. I don't necessarily believe that. I don't think it's that simple. You got to have connections. You got to get in the door. You got to have people that trust you, and have that track record with he's been around a ton of pros. We've talked about that. He's been been part of a lot of winning teams, and his personality is one that gets you in the door. And it's easy for him to sit in living rooms and sell recruits, their families, and those type of things. And I think people maybe undersell the fact that when you're talking like transfer portal and stuff, like relationships with agents matter. Relationships, obviously, with families, with coaches, those type of things. So O is very highly respected. And then Kentucky, he's already aimed high, and now translates that over to Illinois in terms of the guys that he's been going after. And I think Illinois will try to do that anyway, with the way that they've won and the track record they put together. And now they're going to have obviously Terrence. That was one thing that was cool to go out on the trail and hear people talk about. I saw them have Terrence Shannon, a first-round draft pick, and obviously they're hoping that Gaspar Shakachonis or Will Riley or both are first-round picks after 1 year, and that just continues to add to that profile. So O's a big deal. Jeff's worked his butt off. A lot of credit to Jeff, what he's done. He's starting to see the fruits of that, obviously, with getting Kylan, with getting Kasparis. And that international market's something that he continues to tap into. He'll be on the road this weekend for the FIBA European Championships, U18s, where Kasparis is, where a guy who I love on the Brad Bill Elite 16U team is going to be from Finland, who we're going to talk about. So I give those two a lot of credit. Obviously, Tim is highly connected to Mean Streets in Chicago, so he's got that going for him as well. So, but yeah, I agree with you. Normally, maybe part of the rebuild, Brad's not out there. You have a lot of angst. Right now, I don't think that's much of a storyline, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's good for the head coach to be able to trust his assistants and say, hey, we're good. We're going to be good without me out there. Other targets who emerged, Derek, we'll get into our projected stat leaders after this, but I know there's a couple of guys that you've had updates on, especially the kid from Finland.
Yeah, let's just go right there. 2026, Mika Miranen. I hope I'm saying that correct. From Finland, Jeff Alexander was on the front end of that, seeing him when Illinois was over in Spain. He then took a trip over to their, I think it was the U16 European championships for FIBA. Got a chance to get a look at him, and 6'10" and kind of plays like Lauri Markkanen. I mean, he's a really skilled player on the perimeter that can shoot, that can drive it, and has a super high ceiling. He's considered, I know that Travis Branham wrote him as the biggest riser of Peach Jam. I think he looks, and Travis wrote this as well, he looks like a top 10 player in the class, a future potential lottery pick. So UCLA and Illinois were two of his first offers. He just now, after having a phenomenal game in the Peach Jam final with 21 points a game high, just came out and was splashing threes, had a nice and one. Duke's offered, Carolina's offered, Kentucky's offered. So it's going to get crowded. It already has in terms of the big boys. But Illinois has entrenched themselves there. He told me that he wants to take a visit, which is a hat tip to what Jeff's done on the front end of that. So he's outstanding. He's phenomenal. And I would like, if I'm Illinois, that he's playing for Brad Beal. That's a program that's not too far down the road, and you've got some connections there. So that's one that highly impressed me. He blew my mind. He was one of the most impressive, not the most impressive guy I saw.
And you think of, like, I'm thinking even in the future, but even for this recruitment, right? If Kasparis has a really good year, if Tomislav plays well at Illinois, like, that Illinois brand becomes bigger and bigger overseas, and it makes it even easier for Jeff Alexander and Brad Underwood to recruit over there. So that's just something to watch.
Yeah, and on that note, Kasparis and Miranen go against each other in the first game of this European Championships over there in Finland, and Mika's
we'll be more locked in on that than we are on Peach Jam. Like,
yeah,
send Piper to Europe.
I know, it's funny. I'll just say it. Alexander was like, you need to get on a plane to Finland this weekend, man. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go home to my wife and be like, thanks for watching the kids for a week. I'm going to Finland. I don't think flights are super cheap over there either. But, yeah, on Saturday, those guys, Team Lithuania against Team Finland, those guys will play against each other. I know Illini fans will hope that Kasparis whispers some things to Mika about Illinois and maybe just impresses him with this game. He's like, okay, top international talent, they go to Illinois, and we'll see how that plays out. So really just kind of open it up a little bit more. Like, that Brad Bill Elite team that won the 16U title has a bunch of really exciting talent. You got Jalen Mitchell, who people are probably familiar with. He's from Olney, Illinois, made the transition for high school over to Evansville, Indiana, but he's consider. I think ESPN has him as a top 20 talent in 2027. He played at the USA mini camp around the Final Four, was one of about 30 guys to get the invite there. So he's somebody that in 27, we talk a lot about the guys in state that are up in that Chicago area. He's somebody that, 6'7", big bodied wing that has a lot of skill to him. He's exciting. JJ Andrews, probably be a harder one. He's from Arkansas, but Jeff's been working that. He's an athletic wing that can attack the rim. Had a game where he was 10 for 10 from the field, 29 points. And then they just offered Sheik Pearson, who is, I think he's from the St. Louis area. Of course, that's where the Brad Beal program is from. 6'9", 6'10". He kind of emulates, I'm not saying he's going to be this player, play body type and a little bit of play style wise, kind of like maybe an up and coming Khalil Ware type. Like he's a long and lanky center that can block shots, rim runner, those type of things. And getting in on him early, I think that's a good move. And he played well, especially in that championship game.
We'd be a little late to it, so prices might be a little higher. $1,500 round trip to Finland. Not as bad as I thought it would be.
Okay.
It's not terrible. It'd be more about getting the wife to sign off on that one, Piper. But in the future, we might have to start considering these overseas trips for Illinois recruiting. The kid from Canada, Aarons, anything else you want to add on him? Because it seems like Illinois is really up there, interest in him and one of the first big offers.
Yeah, Spencer Aarons over there, and you play Canada, a teammate of Will Riley throughout the spring on that squad, and had a really nice 1-2 punch between those two, kind of that two-man game when they can play pick and pop, they can do dribble handoff stuff, and he's a skilled 6'8", between 6'8", 6'9", forward that can step out and shoot it. He's really like a traditional stretch four, and I like just his ability to do a lot of different things offensively. He can shoot it from the outside. He can drive it a little bit with his handle. Can play mid-post game. I know that's a big area for him that he likes, especially get some matchups one-on-one against smaller defenders where he can back them down. He can shoot fadeaways out of that. And, Brad Underwood loving versatility offensively, loving some positional size, and just that ability to play with floor spacing at the max. So that's someone that they re-offered here recently. Chester Frazier was recruiting him and actually got in pretty early for Illinois back in December of 22. And then now Orlando's working that one. And they re-offered. I think they're going to be decently aggressive in that one. I think they like him quite a bit. And would if I'm an Illinois fan, I would keep an eye on that one to see where it goes because I think they like him a lot.